I wonder how many attorneys worked on those words, right? Hey, it's a real cold day in Northeast Ohio. I have my jacket on, even though I'm indoors. I have my Cleveland Guardians cap on, which I picked up last year very happily, because today, for my public relations class students, I have the privilege of spending some time with Curtis Danburg, who is responsible for media relations and other things for the Cleveland Guardians. So, how are we doing today, Curtis?
Doing great. Great to
Yeah.
join you.
Remind me if we have time at the very end, I might ask you a quick question about what you're doing today and tomorrow and how that kind of fits into the Indians from a PR capacity. But one thing I've learned, because I've done a couple of these interviews already and taught this class before, students always want to know kind of the whys and hows. So if you don't mind, let's begin by you telling us how you got involved in sports publicity and public relations and what steps and paths took you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting path for me, but one that I had a passion for sports from day one. My father was a big baseball fan, so especially of any sports, baseball was kind of the one that he really instilled in me, and we would go to games and really take advantage of those opportunities growing up. So I was a Mentor High School grad. In my senior year, I realized I really wanted to get into sport management, wanted to get into sports in some capacity, and ended up at Bowling Green. And the first week on campus, I met with the professor that was kind of my supervisor, and she said, "Well, what's your career aspiration?" I said, "I want to work for the Cleveland Indians." And at that moment, I mean, I knew that was my goal, and I wanted to do everything can to get to that point. So she said the biggest thing, and you probably say this to your students, John, it's about experience. And I took that to heart. And 2 weeks later, it was probably mid-September, early September of that freshman year, I went out to the Bowling Green Athletic Department. The only person there at the time was the sports information director. And he sat down with me and he started explaining his role. And he's like, I deal with stats, I deal with the athletes, I deal with the public. I'm in the press box dealing with the games. And the light bulb went on for me. And I knew that that was kind of my calling. And from that moment on, it was about uh, kind of identifying opportunities. And I did that. I did 4 years of SID work with BG. And again, keeping the eye on the prize with the Indians. My internship I had to do before graduation. I targeted the Buffalo Bisons, which was the AAA team for the Indians. Said this could be my way to get experience, but also network. And
And get noticed.
yeah, and
Yeah.
was the moment in my career that really transformed the opportunity because I did both. I got a ton of experience because in a minor league capacity, they throw everything at you. I was doing the media guide, I was doing the press releases, I was doing the game notes, and I was networking with people at the Indians and talking about trades. And we're sending this guy up and sending this guy down. And that allowed me in the summer of '96 to do an unpaid internship. Talked to Bart Swain, who's still leading the baseball information department, and said, "Hey, do you have anything for me?" And he said, "No, but if you want to come hang in the press box, you're more than welcome to." I said, "Done." And I did that. I made copies. I went and got a chicken pizza for John Hart at the trading deadline, like George Costanza and Seinfeld. Um, and that opened my door. I was in, and that opened a chance for a paid internship for the summer of '97, summer of '98. And so 3 years post grad, I was an intern, one unpaid, two paid. And there were a lot of tough times, crossroads. Do I stick this out? Do I go to grad school? What do I do? The number two person in baseball information left at the end of the '98 season. That opened and paved the way for me to go full time, and have been in that organization ever since. So I'll be heading into my 28th season in 23.
Wow. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. In 2023, Curtis, what's involved in sports public relations in general? Tell us a bit about your role with the Guardians.
There's a lot of different verticals with under my group. First one, which I grew up in, that baseball information side of things, where you're down dealing with the players, dealing with the baseball media on a day-to-day basis, and doing the game notes and providing information to all the broadcasters and media. Then it's the corporate communications side, promoting the team off the field. Digital communications falls under that, so all our efforts in social media, our website operation, photography. Broadcasting is another layer to that we took on under my leadership, and player relations is another piece of that that's kind of grown into over the past few years. historical artifacts, and then in 2020 I took over the community impact department. So really, kind of our civic responsibilities and how we impact the community. So
Mhm.
it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun, and every day's different.
Sounds challenging too.
Yes, but it's a lot of fun. Like I said.
Curtis, when I teach my intro principles of media class and we get to the chapter on public relations, I always have a fun exercise. I invite a couple of the students up to a whiteboard and give them little markers and ask them to start listing all the publics that they can possibly think of for the Cleveland Guardians. And some classes will get to 8, some will get to 10. One class went more than 20, which I was pretty impressed with. So, what I like to know from you, the horse's mouth, so to speak, what are the most important publics or key audiences for the Guardians?
Well, I think there's two levels of that. There's, what are the platforms and the mechanisms? So the media plays a huge role in that. That's a key audience for us as a comms group to leverage and use the media as a way to get to our fan base. So when you're talking about the fans, we have a marketing department that's done a lot of market research and identified 6 different segments within our fan base. The ones we really go after are those veterans, those key, diehard baseball fans, and then the other ones is kind of those social influencers and the ones that are there to have some fun. And that's the advent of the corner bar in the past few years, and the district ticket where you just pay to get in and you have a general admission ticket and you get your free drink as part of that. So those are our main targets. And then I would say a third one is that family sector. That we have that kids clubhouse, we have the family area. So when we're ever targeting our communication or advertising, we're kind of looking at those 2 to 3 segments.
Mhm. Is there an aspect of your work that the general public might overlook but takes up a sizable amount of time for you and your department?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a segmentation standpoint, it's our number one is probably that core group. And that, especially if you think about baseball information and providing as much detail as possible, and the ones that are listening to the broadcasts or watching on TV. So that veteran diehard group, we spend a lot of time targeting that group, I would think. But there's a lot of reasons for that because of what we get back in return. So I wouldn't say it's a waste of time, but that's probably where we spend the chunk of our time
Yeah.
as it relates to communication and marketing activities.
Yeah. It may not be a waste of time. In fact, it might be just the opposite
Yeah.
because in this social media era, if the diehards like what they see and then they post about that on social media, that has to trickle down in a positive way.
It really does, and it's fun being here 28 years. How the landscape has changed. So half my year, first portion of my career, you had to utilize the media to get to that fan base. That dynamics changed. The evolution of social media and in 2020 and the internet, and then really Twitter and all that. Probably in 2010 is really when that launched. That allowed us to have that direct opportunity of reaching our consumers and reaching our fans, and that was really a game changer.
Yeah. The media becomes less of a gatekeeper and you become
Correct.
more of a one-to-one contact with the fans. So,
Yep.
hey, if you don't mind, could you describe 2 typical days for Curtis Danburg? And I'm going to start with the one that's not on now, but the one that most people would know you as the face of. I'll call it the on the season day, like the day of a game, especially a home game, what might be involved. And then where we are right now, what a typical off-season day might be like.
I always say I have 2 jobs. I have my day job, which is being in the office. It's leading a group. It's planning for what's coming, whether that's in season or off season. That's kind of what that looks like. And then I start in season, transition to my night job, which is heading up in the press box, managing, the group that handles the media, managing the broadcasting, being there as things pop up, which inevitably they do with the fans or I'm the chief meteorologist contact for the Guardians. So I'm talking to Betsy Kling at KYC and the weather team with all weather situations. So that's my whole night job, which makes baseball, it makes for long days, day in and day out. You get the ballpark, although now with, the evolution of Zoom, you can do some of your stuff hybrid during that day job part. But really, that's kind of the evolution. And then you're there until 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you've got a long day. Whether you're zooming, you're up at 8 in the morning, you're finishing at 10 o'clock, and then you could have a 10-game homestand where you're doing that day in and day out without an off day.
Mhm. That is pretty difficult. And how about now? Like in December, January, November, after the season's over, what's a day like for you?
It's probably more that day job. It's planning ahead, getting ready for spring training right now. But at least your evenings, while you might dabble a little and stay on top of your emails and work on some projects, at least you're able to see your family and spend some time and watch a few shows and enjoy your nightlife.
Great. And family too. So,
Yes.
hey, our Principles of Public Relations textbook talks a bit about you see how good someone is in sports PR in case of a crisis or a difficult event or a challenge. What have been some of the most difficult things, perhaps, for you to navigate in your time with the Guardians and Indians?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the guiding principle, and I learned this early on in my career, that PR, people always say public relations, but I learned that PR also stands for planning right, and it's critical. And whether there was COVID, which was a huge challenge, probably one of the biggest challenge in my career, because we didn't know what was coming. I mean, we didn't know we were planning every day for when we're going to know to bring the season back, and that didn't happen until late June. But really, probably the cornerstone of my career and probably the biggest thing was the name change. So from the point of Chief Wahoo and dealing with that, I was in a courthouse prior to Game 3 of the ALCS in Canada, wondering if we're going to have our logo on our uniforms or not. And I mean, think about it. We had two sets of uniforms during the ALCS. Then obviously Chief Wahoo was removed, shortly thereafter in
Right,
2018.
that was 2016 for those of you who don't know
Correct.
the year. Yes, we're
And
talking
then
several years back where
several years back.
yeah, I don't know if it was the province or the nation court basically said you can't have that logo in this stadium.
Luckily, we won that case that day. We were able to wear our regular uniforms and go on to win that series and go to the World Series. 2018, get rid of Chief Wahoo. Obviously, 2020, the dynamic in the world changed with George Floyd and everything going on. And, it made us look, especially ownership, look at our logo and name a lot different. And we made the decision to look into at that point investigating should we make that change. Obviously, end of 2020, we said we are going to make the change, and then we go in the process of what's the new name going to be. And I was, you know, going back to the planning right when we made that decision in 2020 to make that announcement. I learned a ton on the principles of being ready, but sometimes things get thrown curveballs and you have to adjust. So I was in the same room in my basement watching a football game on a Sunday night. New York Times calls and says, "Hey, Curtis, we have the story. We know on Wednesday you're going to make the announcement that you're moving away from it. We're going within an hour." So we had planned for everything, but we had planned to talk to different groups and stakeholders on Monday and then Tuesday and Wednesday before the announcement. All that went out the window.
Yeah,
So
thank you, New York Times.
yeah, exactly. But again, we were ready and we could jump in action. And then come the summer of 21, when we made the announcement to the Guardians, we changed our strategy based on planning and learning, and we adjusted to have Tom Hanks orate the video, and we were now the media. We were getting the news out via our video versus having a press conference and making that announcement. So yeah, I learned a ton in that process. Like I said, it was probably one of the biggest things. Not many brands you get an opportunity to change a brand that had been in existence for over 100 years, and I was a key part of that. And we'll look back as probably a career highlight, but one of the toughest things for me to go through in my PR profession.
Yeah. Curtis, you said something without saying something, and I need my class to catch it. You were using the third person plural, we, as you walked through that entire multi-year process. And you began the story with 2016, but you and I know that the story about the controversy over Chief Wahoo and the name and the logo goes back a lot further than
Oh
that.
yeah,
Um, if you don't mind, and this isn't scripted,
yeah.
but I'll ask because you presented it. Um, take us into the boardroom, take us into the meeting rooms. Um, what were some of the seminal decisions that were made that led to in my opinion, the correct decision to change both the logo and then eventually the name?
Well, we've been dealing with the name. I mean, my whole career and going back to from for decades prior, there was a core group of our fan base that was not supportive of that. And once we started digging into that summer of 2020, in the fall of 2020, and talking to different groups, and not just Native Americans, but just how people, you know, when you have a brand such as ours, you want to bring everybody together. You don't want to be divisive. And I think that was the biggest learning, and kind of, especially to Paul Dolan, is like, wait a minute, we're not collectively bringing people together. There's a core group that don't want to engage with us. And I think that was that light bulb saying we need to change. Was a very difficult decision. One that there's a group of our segment of our fans that probably will never get over it. But we had to do what was right for the community, what was right for the organization. And there were a lot of discussions in those boardrooms of what to do, what not to do. But I think we found a great name that speaks to our community, and we put a focus on that. It wasn't about what transcends the nation. It was what's smart for our community. And the people from Cleveland understand what the Guardians of Transportation are. They're right outside Progressive Field. They have that pride, resilience, and loyalty were key factors we heard from our fans and our research of what they wanted in a new name, and I think we delivered on that.
Yeah. And you're describing key steps in the public relations process when you start with that word research.
Yep.
And then you go
That's where
into
it starts.
planning, because those in my opinion are the two most important things: excellent research and then excellent planning. And whatever comes afterwards, you're probably going to navigate just fine,
Yep.
because you've got research on your side, you understand where the public is, and then you've planned it out well enough that you could even adjust to the New York Times breaking a story a couple of days before you wanted to do it proactively.
Again,
Yeah.
planning right, PR.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Very, very appreciative of that. Hey, last question, and you kind of answered it up front, but I'll ask it again
Hey,
anyway. All right. What advice would you have for, oh, I don't know, my typical age at Tri-C is 20-year-old who doesn't yet have a college degree, but's very passionate about sports and wants to go into sports broadcasting or sports PR or some aspect of sports?
you know what? There's two words, and I said it in kind of that open. It's experience and networking, and the two go hand in hand. You need to get experience, and it doesn't matter what it was. Like, one of the things I did in '96 when I was working for free is I went and got a job at the Cleveland Indians team shop out at the Great Lakes Mall. It's how do you get your way into an organization to then build that network to help escalate your career. And that could be, we have a fan services department, great opportunity for someone in college to get their foot in the door. I always call it our minor league system, where you get your foot in the door, you're dealing with our fans, but you're also dealing with every department. And we can see what skills you have. And maybe you go into communications, or maybe you go into finance, or maybe you go into marketing based on the skills you have. But you need to create those opportunities and get your foot in the door. And a lot of that sometimes informational interviews, identify organizations and people, maybe not the VP level, but the director level, where, hey, would you be willing to give me 5-10 minutes for me to ask some questions? That goes a long way into creating a relationship and building that network for you to make it in this career.
Yeah. That foot in the door expands the network. You keep
Yep.
expanding the network and good things will
I mean,
happen.
if you look at my experience I shared, Bowling Green, I built my core experiences, but I started having network opportunities. I went to Buffalo, built on those experiences, built that network, came to Cleveland, the unpaid internship, working the team shop, built that experience, built that network, and you just keep building on that as you go, and that's when doors open.
Yeah. You said one other thing, though, that I do want to share with my students. One of my favorite sayings: do what you love and love what you do. And something that Curtis has with the Indians and Bobby DiBiasio, the senior VP, and Bobby and I go way back, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Um, his only goal in life, when he and I met, we were graduate students together, actually graduate teaching assistants together at the Ohio State University. His only goal in life was to do public relations publicity for the Cleveland Indians way back then. And that's what he's done. And if you really have passion and you really believe in yourself, and then you follow Curtis's advice here, especially with the networking and the hard work, I think everything will come out fine almost 100% of the time. I really do. So, Curtis, thank you so much. This has
No
just been a
problem.
great time. Hey, I want you to know I bought my 6-pack tickets over December. So I know I've got tickets for at least 7 games this year. So I'm kind of moving a little bit up in that tier in terms of your fan thing. But
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah, I've been going to Cleveland Indians ever since my parents took me. Oh, and by the way, I almost forgot, right? I asked you. We happen to be recording this on February 3rd. Can you tell us what the Indians are dealing with right now and why that's significant for the team and for the region as well?
Yeah, today's a tough day. Next 2 days, really, we lost a dear friend of the organization, and John Adams, who had been connected with us in our organization for 50 years. I mean, over 3,700 games he sat out there, beating his drum and supporting our organization, and it really was his identity as a person, was his connection to us, and we took that to heart. And it's been the past few years has been rough for him with a lot of health complications, and we've stayed in touch with him, and we're there with him until the end. And we're gonna pay tribute to him just like we did in August. We, you know, uh, created took his bench and made a bronze replica drum, and we want him to always have a legacy and be part of our organization. But we're losing somebody that's very close to our hearts, and we'll be honoring him here over the next couple of days.
Yeah. Rest in peace, John Adams.
Amen.
And Curtis, the way the Guardians have been involved in handling this has just been class and excellent sympathy and commemoration for a wonderful life well lived. And can't say enough to you and your team for how well that's been handled. So again, I hope your 2023 year goes excellently. And this year we just want to go a little bit deeper in the playoffs.
Well, as we said, last year was a stepping stone, so we need to build on that, and we haven't won since '48. It's the timing is now.
Yeah, it is now. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, John. Thank you.